So, Year 10, what's going on with this opening passage of Mice and Men? The first thing you come across with your assessment task. Well, here we have this very famous description of the environment that these gentlemen live in. And I think by now you would realise that it comes close to describing a kind of paradise, a place of great peace and a place that would protect these people. Now, if we look at this book in an existential way, if we take the novel and we say, let's think about its context, its time frame, what it's trying to actually say about the human experience, we say, what other texts out there start with a place of paradise? And the obvious answer is the Bible. Book of Genesis, it starts with a garden, much the same way that this place has a described garden. So when the men arrive, they already bring corruption into the place. They already bring an issue and a problem. The men are actually running from the last moment where Lenny had caused some trouble in Weed, in the town of Weed. But let's look at some of the language here. The water is warm too, for it had slipped twinkling over the yellow sands in the sunlight before reaching the narrow pool. On one side of the river, the golden foothill slopes curve up to strong and rocky Calaban mountains. There's key words there like golden. Golden is how this actually operates as a text. We're given adjectives that make this a place greater than the ordinary. It stands out, it's incandescent, it glows, it's mystical and it's magical. And so therefore the environment that these men live in shows that if only they used it as something to protect themselves, something to give themselves calm and solace, the corruption of man might not be so much of a problem for them. It also suggests that there's a purity to George and Lenny, because George and Lenny are the two men who know this place and use it as a place of safety and recluse when they have to return. We notice also that Lenny's famous rabbits are here. Rabbits come out of the brush to sit on the sand in the evening, and the damp flats are covered with night tracks of raccoons, with the spread pad of dogs from ranches, with the split wedge tracks of deer that come in to drink in the dark. There's a natural course of events going on in this particular section. So we do arrive in that Garden of Eden. We do arrive in a place where the environment is perfect. And it sits in direct contrast to the world of Curly's farm, or Curly's dad's farm, and what's going on there, and the way in which men fight against themselves, their natural selves, and their human connections. George and Lenny appear to be the only characters in this entire story who are connected, who have some kind of idea of family. Sure, you might say Curly and his wife, well, there's a marriage, but one could hardly suggest that that is a connection that brings peace, love and joy to those two people. It's violent, it's aggressive, and it's also quite disgusting. I mean, stuff that Curly is described as doing to keep his wife happy is pretty gross. And there's therefore a purity in Lenny and George compared to the ugliness of people like Curly. It's very, very clear in the way they're described. Slim is probably the only other character who comes close to being at one with nature and using nature to protect himself. So the whole idea of using these excerpts is to remind us that Steinbeck is producing something more than just a straightforward novel. He's actually trying to give us a quasi-semi-religious experience when it comes to writing about the natural environment, and that these men are living in a time where it just would take a few moments for them to go back to embracing the natural world and their environment. So that is what really these excerpts, or putting these excerpts in the question, is asking you to do. It's asking you to say, what is it that Steinbeck's doing with the natural world in his descriptive phrases? Start to pull out those adjectives, start to pull out the language of description, and really engage with his imagery, what common themes come across whenever he is using or describing the natural world. Here, of course, I've highlighted crooks And when Crooks is talking to Lenny about Lenny's dream, because Lenny can't help but repeat the thing about the rabbits, you'll note here that Crooks says quite cleverly, um, every person has some kind of thing in their head about it. Everyone has their own piece of land. Um, and every single one of them sees that piece of land as a kind of paradise, a kind of version of heaven. Nobody ever gets to heaven. Nobody gets no land. It's just in their head. They're all the time talking about it, but it's just in their head. So we are reminded that the human is a corrupt creature. We have corrupted ourselves. We have removed ourselves from paradise. We have alienated ourselves from the natural world, from family, and from connection. And Crooks, the alienated character, the one who represents an alienation, an outsider, is able to see that. He's able to judge these people. He's able to actually make a comment about Lenny and George and all the other men, because he doesn't live with the other men, and he's able to watch their behaviour, their mannerisms, their connections and their disconnections, and he realises that they are a long way from any kind of paradise or finding solace or calm in themselves. So I would bring Crooks into your essay, and I would bring the stuff that Crooks says to Lenny, even though Lenny doesn't understand what Crooks is saying. We as a reader do, and that's the key. Just here we have your second part or excerpt from the actual book, and it's when the pool comes back, when Lenny returns to the pool, and you'll see it's still described the same way, but of course this time it's in the afternoon sun as opposed to the morning sun at the beginning. A nice framing device by the novelist. It gives us a portent of what's about to occur, and we read this book therefore inside those two frames, the bookends of this novel, to use a pun. But then here we have this water snake gliding smoothly up the pool, twisting its periscope head from side to side. Now, if you were religious, you would understand that the snake in the Garden of Eden is a representation of corruption, a representation of the impossibility to find any kind of truth in nature or paradise. And so you see here the silent head begged out and is swallowed by the little snake. This little bird this time is destroyed by the snake. So there's a portent of doom. There's a darkness that man has brought into this thing. We are seeing now the truth behind the veneer of the paradise. It is just the natural world doing what the natural world should be doing, and that is the food chain and so forth. So using this particular excerpt, you need to sort of make that comparison in language to that first part, and how is it described as the same? How is it different? How does it compare? What is going on contextually between the beginning and the end of the novel? Now, part of the part that you want to look at from the film, this is where the old man and Chris have climbed the mountain, the old man having risked his health and his life to get up there, and we get revelation.
I'm gonna miss you when you go.
I'll miss you too, Ron. But you're wrong if you think that the joy of life comes principally from human relationships. God's placed it all around us. It's in everything, in anything we can experience. People just need to change the way they look at those things.
Yeah, I'm gonna take stock of that. No, I am. I am. But I want to tell you something. From the bits and pieces I've put together, you know, from what you told me about your family, your mother, and your dad. And I know you got your problems with the church, too. But there's some kind of bigger thing we can all appreciate. And it sounds like you don't mind calling it God. But when you forgive, you love. And when you love, God's light shines on you.
Holy shit.
I told you about that language. Ha!
A lovely speech by the old man to Chris, to Alexander Supertramp. Reminds him of the frailty of human connection and the need for human connection and the need to realise that we are indeed searching for something bigger than the self for most of our time. And he doesn't even bring into question whether or not he is a religious man, Chris. He just says, call it what you will, but if you're happy to call it God, that's what we'll call it. So again, we get those religious overtones, very similar to what Steinbeck was using. And this is a deliberate attack. This is actually a way that the authors are ensuring that we pay attention, because the institution of religion has such a profound history with the human experience. And so most of our stories are embedded within that context. Here, of course, we get the reflection of the sky as an image. Now, we will see that repeated later, or you will when you see Chris pass away in the bus, and he looks at the sky and he comes to that realization of the value of human connection when he says the only true happiness is a shared happiness. And we understand the emotional impact of that because, of course, we've seen the way in which these two parted and that emotional oomph of that moment. But this part is the part that I want you to look at for your essay, and this is the part I want you to make reference to. So in many ways, they're finding their own version of paradise. They're finding their own place of solace, rest, peace, and a place to consider a bigger self. It is dangerous when the man has to climb. He struggles to get up there, and so there is a risk to get up there. Nothing is achieved without risk. Point being made there. But also, despite its aridness, there is a kind of a beauty and a sublime imagery going on here. And we see them at the end straddled against the land and the sky, and not in full shot. They're part of the world that they are existing in. They're part of the natural world, which is really what Chris was after. When he goes to Alaska, he fails miserably because, of course, that is not what the plan originally was. So in this essay, I want you to do a comparison of the themes, and the themes, of course, are human connection, care, love, family, tradition, imagery that's played out, a biblical one or indeed a higher purpose one, which is common, and of course the way in which the natural environment is given a greater stage to play on than the human characters. The human characters are merely almost ant-like in their behaviour. The natural world is much more powerful and evocative. Here you go.